So hi, we're here at the 14th Internet Identity Workshop in Mountain View, California, where we've been talking about Internet identity, and we're here with Mary Ruddy. Hi, Mary. You had a session that you helped.
Yes, I did. And it was an open meeting of the OASIS Trust Elevation Technical Committee.
What's OASIS?
OASIS is a standards body that promotes standards in a lot of the areas of identity and software. So a lot of the things that we make up and invent at Identity Commons can end up being a standard at OASIS.
Okay. And so what was being elevated?
This is all about authentication and trust. Historically, you authenticated and then you were able to continue on and do whatever transactions you need. More and more, authentication is being looked at as dynamic. It is being looked at as continuous. It is being looked at as a step-up authentication. You initially authenticate, and then depending on what you're doing, you may need more trust. You may be trying to do a transaction that's high value, and so you need to step up your authentication. So that's what we mean by trust elevation in this TC.
Okay. So it's no longer a one-stop step.
Exactly.
It's like an ongoing process.
Yes. And so that's an evolutionary thing. There have been some dynamic authentication processes for a while, but we're reaching a tipping point realizing that the norm should be a continuous or step-up support of authentication. A lot of the software out there doesn't really support that. Financial services has been sort of a leading edge in doing that. If you try to do something that's high value, high dollar amount, they'll stop you, they'll make you call on the telephone to do a second factor. But there are a lot more systems that need to handle that and be constructed that way.
What was discovered or discussed in the session?
Well, we're taking a three-phase approach to the TC's work. The first is to do...
The TC is the technical committee.
The technical committee, yes,
okay.
Excuse me. The first phase was to do a survey of methods of trust elevation, and we've just completed that phase and published a document on that. And the second phase is to do an analysis of those methods, the strengths and weaknesses of those methods, how they can be combined to better elevate trust or better mitigate us against certain threats. And then the third phase is going to be to come up with some protocols, some commonalities that we found that we think we should be fostering.
And have all of these been completed, or are you?
We're just completed phase one, so
okay.
We've done the survey, and we've also come out with a new taxonomy for trust elevation. Classic regular authentication is who you are, what you know, what you have.
Okay.
ITUT recently came out with their X1254 document that added to that a fourth category of behavior. We agree with them that behavior should be added as a category. And
can you give me an example of a behavior?
A behavior is the way you always browse and go to different pages on a website. An example of behavior is other things that you've done in the past, who you're related to, who you've got connections to. So it's pulling in a lot more attributes about how you are interacting with the online.
Okay. Were there any major takeaways or important what should people have remembered out of that session?
I think the biggest takeaway is acknowledging that there's sort of this change to going to more dynamic authentication. That's first takeaway. So people should be changing their thinking.
Okay.
That dynamic should be more the rule rather than the exception going forward. Second takeaway is that behavior and context are really important factors. So we've elevated context up to a level of the factors, so we now recognize 5 factors. And of course, context applies to the first 4 factors, but more and more people are using geolocation as an additional factor that is a contextual factor to determine whether you really are who you say you are, for example.
Okay. And if people want to find out more about this, where would they go?
They could go to the oasis-org website and look up the Trust Elevation TC, or they could contact Mary Ruddy directly.
Okay. What's the best way to do that?
Mary@Maristic.com.
Thank you. And how would you spell Maristic?
MERISTIC.
Thanks very much. Have a good conference.
My pleasure.